A misconfigured Amazon Web Services database exposes a risk screening database, and it seems the exposure itself was an instance of third-party risk. Farewell to Coinhive, long a favorite of crypto miners everywhere. Intel pulls back from a 5G project with a Chinese partner. A quick look at Bronze Union and what the threat actor's up to. Facebook will soon help you clear your data. And if you have a lawful intercept tool you no longer need, please don't sell it on eBay. Now I'd like to share some words about our sponsor, Akamai. You're familiar with cloud security, but what about security at the edge? With the world's only intelligent edge platform, Akamai stops attacks at the edge before they reach your apps, infrastructure, and people. Their visibility into 178 billion attacks per day means that Akamai stays ahead of the latest threats, including responding to zero-day vulnerabilities. With 24/7 365 Security Operations Center support around the globe and over 300 security experts in-house, Akamai surrounds and protects your users wherever they are, at the core, in the cloud, or at the edge. If you're going to RSA this year, visit Akamai in the North Hall, booth 6153, to take part in their Crack the Code Challenge for an opportunity to win a new 3D printer. Akamai, intelligent security starts at the edge. Learn more at Akamai, that's akamai.com/security. And we thank Akamai for sponsoring our show. The CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by RSA Conference, taking place March 4th through the 8th at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. The CyberWire is a proud media sponsor of RSA Conference, where the world talks security. Learn more and register today at rsaconference.com/cyberwire19. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, February 28th, 2019. A misconfigured AWS database has induced another data exposure. Security researcher Bob Diachenko discovered the Dow Jones Risk Screening Database residing on a publicly accessible Elasticsearch cluster, TechCrunch says. The watch list contains open-source data on more than 2.4 million potentially risky individuals and business entities. The data includes personal information as well as extensive notes for each entry, detailing the reasons for its inclusion on the list. This data is used by companies to screen clients and identify illegal behavior, although TechCrunch notes that people can end up on the list based on flimsy evidence. While the data itself was compiled from public sources, the fact that a person or entity is on the list is highly confidential and could damage the reputations of some people who might not deserve it. Diachenko says the list contains, quote, the identities of government officials, politicians, and people of political influence in every country of the world, end quote. A Dow Jones spokesperson said the leak was due to an unauthorized third party's misconfiguration of an AWS server. A similar incident occurred in 2016 when a security researcher found Thomson Reuters' watch list containing 2.2 million profiles in an Apache database that was configured for public access from the internet by a third party. These incidents serve as a reminder that companies need to take responsibility for their database deployments, even if they outsource some of the work. Researchers at Cisco recently took a close look at data privacy and security in their 2019 Privacy Maturity Benchmark study. Michelle Dennedy is Chief Privacy Officer at Cisco. She joins us to share their findings.
Last year was really the run-up to GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe. And so we asked specifically folks, are you ready? Do you feel like you're in compliance, that such as that is, as well as that's known? And we found that about 60% of our respondents feel good today, that they are ready for GDPR. You know, it is a law and it is in force. And about 97% of them felt that GDPR did apply to them in their business. This is a global study. So countries as far-flung as Japan and Hong Kong and Australia all feel that the impacts of GDPR are hitting them as well. And they're also preparing and getting ready for this. So I think that was kind of the aha number one, is that even sectoral laws have global application in the digital world. I think the other big aha moments are the recognition of what I call data friction or sales slowdown is growing. So last year, we found about 65% of our companies were coming back and saying, yes, we are seeing that business is being slowed down or even stopped by questions of security and privacy. And this year, it was about 87% of respondents recognizing that questions of cybersecurity and privacy are actually slowing business. And so that's where the really interesting dig-in correlations start to begin.
Now, this survey is obviously, and I think justifiably, based around GDPR, and there are pushes for similar type of legislation to be coming to the United States. There are folks who are pushing for a national data protection law rather than going state by state. When you look in your crystal ball, when you look toward the horizon, what do you see coming?
Yeah, so I'm one of those folks. And you can see it's not just me alone as the privacy person who's obviously got personal investment in that.
Right.
Chuck Robbins, our CEO, has announced his support. I think that if I look at my crystal ball, it took 10 years for GDPR to become a law. The Twitter answer is, oh, let's import GDPR. And that's adorable. But when the real work is done, first of all, most of the countries in the European theater are civil law countries and not common law. That's a distinction that has meaning. We are a common law nation. So that means we start with principles and we build out with use cases, which are our case laws, our judiciary. That doesn't mean we don't have laws. It means that each principle actually has quite a bit of impact. Essentially, a civil law country tries to cover all use cases as widely as possible and then figures out how that law is applied over time. Both schemas are compatible, but that doesn't mean that you can just pick up one law with all of the negotiations and hearings and cultural specificities, including data protection agencies that exist in all the member states. We have attorneys general. They're not the same as DPAs, but they act as DPAs in many significant ways. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I don't think it's going to take the 10 years it took GDPR to be negotiated and implemented, but I do think it's going to take some time. And the time is now to get government leaders behind not a quick fix, but a real fix. And so that's what we're really pushing for. Clear privacy by design, privacy engineered, understanding what is good, understanding how to get to a risk-based situation that is interoperable, not just with GDPR, but with what the Brazilians have passed recently, the Japanese have passed, our neighbors to the north in Canada have had PIPEDA for a very long time. And we have gone sector by sector, but we're finding the example is that I often reach to is the pacemaker. If I have a pacemaker implanted in my body and I travel from Massachusetts to California, the IoT safety and security laws in one jurisdiction may not match the healthcare law and data of another. This is one person with one device, and we need to make that safe and secure, high fidelity, high integrity. That is our mission.
That's Cisco's Chief Privacy Officer, Michelle Dennedy. The report is the 2019 Privacy Maturity Benchmark Study. ZDNet reports that the Coinhive crypto mining service, notorious for its widespread use in cryptojacking campaigns, will shut down in March. Coinhive was an in-browser service that let websites use their visitors' computers to mine Monero. The company said in a blog post that the project is no longer economically viable due to a recent hard fork and the gradual devaluation of Monero. A hard fork is what happens when a blockchain protocol is changed, requiring all users of the protocol to upgrade to the newest version. Monero seems to ban the use of application-specific integrated circuits, or ASICs, by implementing multiple hard forks each year. Each hard fork causes the currency's mining activity to plummet, as the ASICs that have cropped up since the last hard fork are rendered incompatible. Coinhive will cease operations on March 8th, the day before another hard fork takes place on the 9th. While Coinhive was the most popular miner for cryptojackers, crypto mining attacks will continue without it, as there are a number of Coinhive spin-offs, and attackers can always develop crypto miners on their own. Intel has ditched its 5G deal with Unisoc, China's largest mobile chip developer, due in part to worries that the partnership would complicate matters in Washington, the Nikkei Asian Review reports. The deal was announced less than a year ago at the 2018 Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. The U.S. has greatly increased its pressure on Chinese technology companies since then, citing security concerns that the equipment could be backdoored during production. Intel says the decision was mutual and that there was no political pressure from the U.S. Nikkei cites a source as saying that Intel's former CEO, Brian Krzanich, who departed the company in July, was the main advocate for the deal. Unisoc, a subsidiary of Chinese state-owned Xinhua Unigroup, announced on Tuesday that it will design its own 5G modem chip in-house. Huawei, which has borne the brunt of Washington's criticisms, has been ridiculing the U.S.'s security concerns at this year's Mobile World Congress. Earlier today, the company pleaded not guilty to U.S. charges of trade secret theft. Canada will decide tomorrow whether to begin extradition proceedings for Huawei's CFO, Meng Wanzhou, who has been charged with fraud by the U.S. The legal and commercial wrangling will continue. There is, of course, clearly some Chinese espionage afoot, whether Huawei or any other company is implicated or not. Research from SecureWorks on a suspected Chinese threat actor known as Bronze Union, or APT-27, highlights the group's flexibility and persistence. The hackers use updated versions of tools that have been publicly available for over a decade, as well as custom-made malware, to conduct espionage and theft against political, technology, manufacturing, and humanitarian organizations. Their activities include spying on dissidents and other persons of interest, as well as stealing secrets about cutting-edge weapons technologies. Facebook will finally release its Clear History feature later this year, the Telegraph notes. The tool, which was first announced last May, will allow users to delete data collected by Facebook from third-party apps and websites. Mark Zuckerberg said the tool will be similar to clearing one's browser history. The Verge notes that this could potentially have a significant negative impact on Facebook's revenue, which relies heavily on targeted advertising, but it would be a positive step toward transparency and granting users control over their data. Smartphone hacking devices from Cellebrite are selling for cheap on eBay, according to Forbes. The tools, which are meant to be used by law enforcement, can be used to hack iPhones and Android devices. Israeli company Cellebrite sells the products for $6,000 apiece, but used versions are being sold on eBay for as low as $100. While the devices themselves are dangerous in the wrong hands, a more pressing concern is that the vulnerabilities they exploit will be discovered by malicious actors. Cellebrite's tools presumably take advantage of zero-day vulnerabilities to yield access to phones. Security researcher Matthew Hickey, who bought 12 of the devices earlier this month, has been trying to find out what information they contain. He says the software is encrypted, but the keys should be extractable from the device, although he hasn't had any luck so far. Hickey was also concerned to find leftover data from the previous owner, including Wi-Fi passwords, which is particularly worrying, considering that most of Cellebrite's customers are government agencies, such as the FBI. Cellebrite is understandably unhappy with these developments and urges customers to return their old devices to the company for proper disposal. And eBay does not count, friends, as proper disposal, nor is Craigslist or an ad in the local penny saver, the local flea market, and so on. And now, a word from our sponsor, LookingGlass Cyber Solutions. Cyber threats are a risky business. Criminals are taking bigger risks than ever before to acquire your organization's sensitive data. As pressure increases, you need a partner to help manage and control your digital business risk. Slide into LookingGlass's booth number 2327 in the South Hall at RSA Conference 2019 to hear how you can better manage your organization's risky business by leveraging their 20-plus years of investment and tradecraft for an outside-in view of your security posture. Or step away from the hectic expo floor for a demo tailored to your business needs in the LookingGlass meeting suites at the Marriott Marquis. Reserve your demo and learn more about LookingGlass at RSA Conference or visit their website, lookingglasscyber.com. That's lookingglasscyber.com. And we thank Looking Glass for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Malek Ben Salem. She's the Senior R&D Manager for Security at Accenture Labs. Malek, it's great to have you back. You wanted to share with us some work that you've had your eye on, and this is some folks who've been measuring the commoditization of cybercrime. What's going on here? What can you share?
Yeah, this is a study conducted by researchers from Delft University. They wanted to look at to what extent cybercrime has been commoditized. We've all observed the increasing commoditization now, over the last few years, particularly by looking at reports on cybercrime as a service offerings, which included DDoS attacks starting at $10. But the researchers wanted to investigate whether this spanned beyond DDoS attacks, whether a cyber criminal could buy everything they wanted if they decided to perpetrate an attack. For instance, suppose they wanted to hit a bank with financial malware. Could they do so with off-the-shelf components? So they explored which parts of cybercrime value chains were successfully commoditized and which ones were not. They also looked at what kind of revenue criminal B2B services, business-to-business services, generated and how fast they were growing. And their study covered 8 online anonymous markets over 6 years. It included the original Silk Road as well as Alphabay.
And so what did they discover?
There were some interesting findings. They found that the number of vendors offering these cybercrime products was growing over time. As a matter of fact, it grew by 150% between 2015 and 2017. They also revealed that the cybercrime was very much resilient to law enforcement takedowns, which I guess we knew. You take down one of these online markets, anonymous markets, it restarts under another name. They also found that commoditization was not happening across all products. So for certain categories, there was enough variety and standardization, for example, in malware. But for others, such as exploits, there was a scarcity of various exploits. There was a focus on office exploits, but not enough to cover all types of exploits. Another thing that they found was that a lot of the offerings were related to cash-out offerings, such as credit card numbers, growing number of distribution vehicles, such as compromised websites that you can use to distribute malware. But there was not enough, again, around exploits and other types of cybercrime offerings.
So if I'm a cyber criminal looking to go out there and do some bad things, but I don't necessarily have the technical skills to spin it up on my own, I might be somewhat limited in what I can go out there and find.
Exactly. And that's basically the major finding. So overall, their findings suggest that while there's growth in cybercrime, commoditization may be a spottier phenomenon than what we've previously assumed. Obviously, commodities or cybercrime offerings may be available somewhere else, like in forums. But in those cases, forums actually do not necessarily offer the safeguarded structure that online anonymous markets may offer. And therefore, they would require more interaction by somebody who's looking to buy something, to buy a service or an offering, which means that whatever is offered there is, for the most part, a service rather than a commoditized product, right? So if we're not seeing traces or evidence for cybercrime commodities in these online anonymous markets, then we're unlikely to see evidence for them elsewhere. And this is what the study concludes, is that, again, where there's some limited evidence that this market is being commoditized, it's not across the board, right? It's lowering the barrier for would-be criminals, but these would-be criminals would not be able to outsource everything they need in order to conduct a cyber attack.
Yeah, it's interesting findings. Malek Ben Salem, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dave.
And that's the CyberWire. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Observit, the leading insider threat management platform. Learn more at observit.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our CyberWire editor is John Petrick, social media editor Jennifer Iben, technical editor Chris Russell, executive editor Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.